Hello, welcome back to Kim Reads as we continue with The Secret of Shadow Ranch. Chapter 13, Missing Artists. When Nancy regained consciousness, Dave was bending over her. Are you okay? He asked anxiously, helping to sit her up. Any bones broken? No, said Nancy. I guess I'm just bruised. Have I been lying here long? Only a few minutes, Dave replied. I saw you smack into that palomino and go sailing off. You really reached for the moon. Dave lifted Nancy to her feet and steadied her for a moment. As she thanked him, she could hear horses whinnying and men shouting. The phantom sure spooked the palominos, Dave said. Did you get a good look at it? Nancy shook her head regretfully. I didn't get close enough to see how it was rigged. A horseman reared up beside them. It was Walt Sanders. Fences have been cut, the ranch foreman barked. We've got to round up those palominos. Could take all night or longer if they run up the hills. He spurred off and Dave turned to Nancy. Can you make it to the house by yourself? Don't worry about me, she assured him. I'm fine. Dave looked around the darkness, but there was no sign of Nancy's horse. I reckon he bolted, he said. His own mount, a seasoned work animal, stood nearby, unaffected by the panic in the meadow. Dave stepped into his saddle. Keep clear of those running horses, he warned, then rode off after the foreman. By the time Nancy had walked the length of the meadow to the ranch house, she no longer felt shaken from her fall. In the living room, there were 3 other girls and Aunt Bet. On the table, lighted was the lamp which belonged to the Humbers. As Nancy walked in, Bess cried, Did you catch the phantom? Sorry, no. Was there any damage this time? Mrs. Raleigh asked. Nancy reported that the bad news about the cut fence and the palominos. Aunt Bet's voice was strained as she said, If we lose those horses, it'll be a crushing blow for us. I appreciate all you've done, Nancy. Bess and George told me how you found the letter. It was so clever of you to deduce what Francis Humber did, Alice said admiringly. But you didn't finish reading it, George reminded Nancy. Nancy took the letter from her pocket, smoothed out the paper, and held it close to the oil lamp. George said he left off where he said he had melted down some gold into special pieces. Hey, here's the place, said Nancy. She read the next sentence. My treasure is hidden in the oldest dwelling ranch. That's his house, Aunt Bet exclaimed. We were told that Sheriff Humber built it first. Read on, Bess urged. Exactly where is the treasure? Nancy shook her head. He didn't say. Listen. I fear that I am followed, and even this note may fall into enemies' hands. Therefore, I say only you know the place I mean. George groaned. We'll have to search the whole house. We better get started. There's likely to be a space under a loose floorboard, said Nancy, or a niche in a chimney flue, or perhaps a false wall in the closet. She suggested that each of them take a section of the house to investigate. Nancy herself went to the fireplace in the living room. She thought that one of the stones in it might conceal a hiding place. With the aid of her flashlight, the young sleuth tried to peer between the rocks, but they were set close together and no space was visible. She pushed hard on each one, but none budged. When she finished, Nancy turned her attention to the Indian grindstone because it was set in the middle. She thought there might be something special about it and tried hard to remove the stone. It was as tightly in place as all the others. By the time Nancy had finished checking in the living room, the rest of the searchers had straggled back. They reported no success. Baffled, Nancy suggested that they go to bed. She felt sore and weary. Maybe I'll get to think more clearly after I get some sleep. She gave Valentine's letter to Aunt Bet for safekeeping. At breakfast, Uncle Ed was gray-faced and grim. None of the men had been to bed the night before. 6 palominos are missing and 2 are wire-cut, the rancher reported. Tex snorted. The meadow fence was wrecked. Some no-good varmint cut it in the last 30 places. We've been working on repairs all night. Dave is still out there finishing. Uncle Ed announced that he was driving into Tumbleweed to inform the sheriff of what had happened. Maybe he can spare me a man, or I could get some volunteers to help me round up the horses. We'll have to go in the mountain and look for them. Also have the telephone company send a man to fix a wire. What about water? Mrs. Thurman asked. The rancher replied that the pump and the lights, too, would be working in a couple of hours. The generator was damaged, he said, but not seriously. The big mischief was the attack on the horses, Nancy remarked. Whoever planned that wanted to be sure things would be dark and confused and you could not get help in a hurry. The rancher quickly finished eating, was rising to go when Dave came in. The cowboy asked if he could see the Raleighs alone for a few minutes, and added, "You can come too, Nancy." Uncle Ed led the way into the living room and closed the door. "Now what is it?" he asked. Swiftly, Dave told the couple about a search for the bandit's fortune. "If I do find the treasure," he asked earnestly, "I certainly intend to turn over a share to you both." Mr. Raleigh smiled. "Thank you, Dave, but we wouldn't hear of it. I wish you luck." Aunt Bet now told the men about Nancy's discovery of Valentine's letter. Nancy pointed out that surely the treasure was linked to the trouble to the ranch. "Until it's found, I'm afraid the phantom horse will continue to appear." Uncle Ed agreed. "You're a remarkable sleuth, young lady. Keep up the good work." Dave said that with Nancy on the case, he thought he had a good chance to find the treasure. "I won't be able to do much today. We have those palominos to look for." Nancy admitted that she didn't know where to search for the next treasure. Aunt Bet patted her shoulder. "You need a holiday from all this trouble. Why don't you girls drive into Phoenix for some fun?" "That's a wonderful idea," Nancy said, as she thought her friends were delighted at the prospect. Nancy hurried to get the ranch wagon. When she pulled up in front of the two patios, George was waiting with 2 thermo bottles and a jug of water. As she put them into the back of the ranch, Dave came hurrying past. He grinned. "I'm glad to see that you tenderfoot gals have turned into water-conscious Westerners." Alice and Bess were approaching the car and heard him. When he was out of earshot, Alice said, "As for you, Nancy, he's really flipped." "And what'll poor Ned do?" George teased. Nancy grinned. "We'll be back home by the time he gets back from Europe." "Just wait until the square dance tomorrow night," said Bess. "I'll bet Dave's a marvelous dancer." "I wish," said Alice, "there was somebody to take me." There was a gleam in Bess's eye as she said, "Don't give up hope, Alice. You might meet somebody at the rodeo or barbecue." George looked at her cousin quizzically, and Nancy smiled. Both knew Bess loved playing the role of matchmaker. "What have you got up your sleeve?" George demanded. "Just my arm," replied Bess, but she grinned. Nancy spoke up. "Well, let's do some shopping in Phoenix. I'd like to find something special to wear tomorrow." "I know," exclaimed Bess. "Let's buy all Indian costumes." When they reached the city, George directed Nancy to a shop which sold a variety of Indian apparel and souvenirs. The sight of the colorful squaw dresses drove all thoughts of the ranch trouble from the girls' minds. Happily, they tried them on and helped one another to make selections. Alice was delighted and pirouetted in front of the long mirror to watch the wide skirts swing out. Finally, Nancy chose a turquoise blue model with silver rack trimming. George's choice was a bold red which set off her short, dark hair, and Bess selected one with a yellow skirt and black bodice. Alice picked out a pumpkin-colored costume trimmed in the back. With their purchases in boxes, and girls strolled down the streets to a Spanish restaurant. Here they ate a delicious lunch of tacos and spicy chili. For dessert, they had iced fresh fruit. Tacos is put in italics here. I wonder why that is. Best side, that was super. Afterward, they walked to a wide street beside a park where an outdoor painting exhibit was being held. The group stopped now and then admired and complimented the artists who had made their work. As the girls lingered over painting, Nancy wandered ahead, then stopped before a lone picture. After a casual glance, she suddenly realized it was a pastel drawing of the old hotel in the ghost town on Shadow Mountain. Quickly, she called her friends. "That's the same hotel, all right," George declared. "That's the one where we hitched our horses and found the crushed crayon." Alice was pale. "My father did that pastel. I know it." The artist's chair beside the picture was vacant. "I must find him," Alice cried out. And that's the end of that chapter. See you later.